Okay, the motion. This House believes that assault weapons should be banned in the United States. And help me to welcome our presenters for tonight. On the affirming side, we have Ms. Teresa Bova. Mr. Michael Arabs, a senior major in history. And on the opposing side, Mr. Alex McKenna, a sophomore major in political. And Mr. Adam Natina, a marketing and communications writer at Franciscan University.
Right on.
Finally, I'd like to welcome our chair for tonight, our Vice President, Mr. Nicholas Larkins.
Please stand for the opening prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven,
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Saint Michael the Archangel,
defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan, all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen.
our patron Saint Thomas Aquinas,
Pray for us.
in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you, President Stanley, for that wonderful introduction. Not much else needs to be said. The motion we have before us tonight. This House believes that assault weapons should be banned in the United States. On the affirming side, we would like to welcome Ms. Teresa Bova to give her first speech of the night. Ms. Bova, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight to discuss something that I hope will bring level heads and clear consciences as we exit, hopefully. One of the things that I would like to bring up first of all is that owning a gun is not immoral. Amen? Amen. Or hear, hear? Hear. Thank you. The action of owning a gun, the action of possessing a gun, that in itself is not inherently immoral. What we're asking here is, in the U.S., should we ban assault weapons? The situation in the U.S. currently honestly varies so much area to area, but one of the biggest things we have right now is violence from citizen to citizen. And there's a lot of violence between citizens. 73% of the murders in 2016 in the U.S. were committed with a firearm. There are people who own guns and have them and use them for hunting, for protection, for their family. They use them to do target practice, same way we used to use darts in the olden days. But there are also people who own guns because they would like to have a weapon to hurt other people. And those people, unfortunately, the amount of screening that goes through people who try to get firearms, as much as we want to say that it's good and that there's enough precautions that people who are dangerous don't have them, there are no questions about whether people who struggle with alcoholism, they can get guns. There are people who struggle with depression, anxiety, PTSD. We're talking about taking guns away from civilians, but what about former military members who own guns? And so many of our former military struggle with PTSD. And we're not asking any questions about their well-being. What we want to know is the well-being of the people. Is that being placed ahead of everything else? And unfortunately, in the U.S., like self-sufficiency is something that's very close to all of our hearts. We all know this. But it might be practical and necessary to ban guns in the U.S. because the situation here is that there's so much violence that could have been prevented if people who struggle with mental illness and people who intend on hurting other people were not able to access firearms. We're talking about a ban, which means taking away guns from people who currently have them, specifically guns that are automatic and semi-automatic. The length of, the amount of ammo you can have, that varies also. But we're not talking about handguns here. We're talking about weapons that the military uses to fight people who are super, super far away from us. We don't need that on American soil. We don't need that between neighbors who live next to each other. We don't need people with cabinets full of weapons and itinerary. We don't need that in the U.S. right now. What we need is more attention for people who are trying to hurt other people. And what I'm asking is the situation that's going on right now more pressing than things that hypothetically could happen in the future? The government overtaking us, all these fears and qualms about should we form a secret militia of just Catholics with rifles? That's not what we're talking about. Personally, I would like to go back to teeny tiny little vintage pistols. That's what I'd like, but that's fine. But we want to know which is more pressing: the people who are hurting themselves today, or people we might have to fight against in the future. And I'd say it's more important to worry about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bova, for opening our debate tonight. From the opposing side, the chair would like to recognize Mr. Natina. Mr. Natina, you have 6 minutes.
Hey, how you doing? Howdy. So I just want to say right off the basis, Robert Francis O'Rourke, hell no, you're not taking my AR. You're not taking my 2 Okay, and that's for a very simple reason. Alex is going to talk about the natural law case to have firearms, including these so-called assault weapons. But simply put, a ban on assault weapons or assault rifles does not work. Empirical data suggests it does not. We've had this in our country before, and if you look at the statistics, if you break them down, it shows that this law would not be effective and would just lead to more distrust and more violence in the populace. So let's consider a few things right here, okay? The violent crime rate in this country has been going down dramatically since the 1990s, since the mid-1990s. Now, I know most of you weren't born. I actually was born. I'm an old guy here. So, but in 1994, we put in a quote-unquote assault weapons ban. In the decade before 1994, there were 5 of 15 mass shootings in this country committed with quote-unquote assault rifles. During the ban, 6 of 16. Since 2007 to 2017, there were 7 of 36 quote-unquote mass shootings, 4 more people killed with assault weapons. It's a negligible amount of difference. The situation is that the vast majority of murders by guns are with handguns. Are we banning those outright? What is an assault weapon? What is an assault rifle? We need to define that term, first of all. One of the things about gun crime in this country is the vast majority are suicides. I agree that we have to get help to people who need help. But having an outright ban simply does not work. The data does not suggest it because compliance is an issue. If you make a law, people have a choice. They can follow it or not follow it. Data suggests they won't follow it. In 1990, Connecticut passed one of the stringent gun laws in the country, and they had 4 people out of over 100,000 gun owners of so-called assault rifles, AR-15, AK type rifles, turn those guns in. 4 people. Threatened with felonies. The government said, we're going to send you to jail for multiple years, and 4 people said, okay, I better turn this in. The other people said, hell no! So what is the point in making a law if it's not even going to do what it says it's going to do? Gun owners know these things. They know registrations. They know all of these tactics are really tools to take weapons out of the populace, which overwhelmingly you have 1 or 2, a few outliers every year who commit crimes with these. And one of the things is that statistically, it's so rare. Okay, there were, between 2007 and 2017, between 2007 and 2017, each year, an average of 1,700 people, almost as many people as in this university, were killed with knives or blunt force objects. I got you. But the thing is, in that same time period, 173 people were killed in mass shootings. 173. It would take 100 years of that to get to 1 year of that blunt force object or sharp knife killing spree. I mean, are we going to be like England? Are we just going to, now like the police come and they take like your kitchen knife and they put it up on Twitter and like they're taking this dangerous weapon out of the hands of criminals? I mean, it's kind of preposterous. If you look at the data, an assault weapons ban and an assault rifle ban is not going to work. Never mind the ambiguity of this term, which has never been properly defined. It's just not going to work. And the only thing it is going to do is cause more distrust. It's going to cause more paranoia, and it's going to divide this country further. And, it's nice that Beto O'Rourke can have his moment on the DNC debate stage, but it's a preposterous proposition, and really it's dangerous and irresponsible because pretty much almost 99.9% of people who own ARs and AKs are responsible. And they're also, these are pretty fun to shoot. I'm just going to put it out there.
Thank you, Mr. Nantina. Before we move on to our second speaker from the affirming side, I'd like to take the first question for the affirming speaker, Ms. Bova. Do we have a question from the floor for Ms. Bova? The chair would like to recognize the woman in the front. Your last name, please? Cirillo. Ms. Cirillo.
So, my question, how are you going to enforce the taking away of assault weapons? That is a wonderful question, and my debate partner, Mr. Raps, will address that as well. But fortunately, it will not be up to me personally to enforce that. That wasn't the question on the poster. One of the most important things to look at is how much power the government has to take away our weapons. And that's really it. I mean, my partner will also go deeper into this, but many people have tried to oppose this, like you said, and it hasn't really worked because the government is much deeper into our society than we think that they actually are. And they will come and take us. I mean, they have the force, they have the manpower, and they have the information on us to be able to take away pretty much anything, unfortunately. But I think that in this case, that
Please conclude.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tina, or Ms. Bova. If we can now have a question for Mr. Tina. Chair would like to recognize the gentleman in the turquoise shirt. Your name, please?
Daniel Gonzalez.
Mr. Gonzalez.
All right, so you say that there's no evidence that banning assault weapons has lowered shootings at all. Well, I think if we look at other countries such as Canada, where there are much stricter laws.
Please frame your remark in the form of a question.
So what about? Are you only considering the United States, or are you considering other countries in this claim?
Mr. Medina.
Taking into account other countries as well, Australia's gun ban that was enacted after the Christchurch shootings has been very poorly compliance rate. You have to remember, though, that there are 16 million guns, 16 million of these quote-unquote assault-style rifles, ARs, AKs, other semi-automatic rifles in this category in this country. That's vastly more than any other country, and yet the gun homicide rate has dropped from 6.2% in 1994 to the most recent year we have data on 2017 to 3.38. I mean, that speaks for itself. So, especially in the United States, but it's true in other countries as well.
Thank you, Mr. Medina. The chair would like to now recognize Mr. Michael Aras, the second presenter from the affirming side. Mr. Aras.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you all for coming. It's really great to see everyone here, especially the boys up top. So, The question tonight, as I always like to reiterate, this House believes that assault weapons should be banned in the U.S. Now, what that means is fairly evident, but there are a few terms we need to define. Assault weapons. Mr. Natina brought it up that it's a very loosely defined term. So for the purposes of this debate, I'd like to define it right now for you all. So, I'm going to punch one of you. So, when we consider an assault weapon, I'd like to bring that down to base terms and what we can, basically how we can define something of this nature. So, we want to talk about caliber, we want to talk about rounds per minute. So, caliber would be, Ms. Bove and I agreed on this prior to this debate, 45 pistol ammunition or lower, so 38, still everything below that. So, anything above a 45, not allowed in any sort of semi-automatic or automatic weapon system. Now, this does not include things like bolt action or lever action. So, essentially, for those of you who aren't as well versed in guns as some of us, including myself, honestly, pull the trigger once. Bullet goes out, pull the trigger again, bullet doesn't come out. You have to do some sort of external action for another bullet to be, or another round to be chambered into the gun. So that would be how we would define an assault weapon. A weapon that fires a high, we'll say for the purposes of this, relatively high caliber round at either an automatic or semi-automatic rate. And this would also include submachine guns, which fire pistol ammunition at an automatic rate. So anything that fires something at an automatic rate or high caliber rounds at a semi-automatic rate would be under this ban. That's our term defined. So now that I've killed 1 minute of my valuable speaking time, we'll continue. I want to talk about a few things relating to how the United States views assault weapons and certain examples of conflict that have happened. The first one, Ruby Ridge, Idaho. This was a standoff between the FBI and 4 members of a family, the Weaver family. I don't know if any of you are aware of this, very few people are. It ended with the death of Vicky and Samuel Weaver being a juvenile, both killed by the FBI. And 1 U.S. Marshal killed. The other members of the family were later exonerated after a set amount of jail time. So, in this case, we have someone who is known by the ATF, by the FBI, for being a known arms distributor. And then this eventually escalates to an 11-day standoff and a firefight with a government agency, resulting in 2 deaths of a woman and a child. Next one. The Melchior Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. Many more of you would be familiar in this case. This is when the FBI engaged in a standoff with around 26, 27 members of a wildlife reclamation front. They wanted to take back government land, give it back to the people. This resulted in the death of 1 member of this group, another member wounded, and 26 arrests. Now, the last one that I want to touch on, Waco, Texas, or Waco, Texas, depending on the pronunciation. A religious group, generally Christian, took over, well, didn't take over, they constructed it, it was their center, the Mount Carmel Center. Not a Catholic group, but a Christian group, a Protestant Christian group. They were stockpiling firearms for, we don't know the purpose, because in the ensuing firefight with government agencies, the building caught on fire, and in the fire and gunfight, 76 members of this religious organization were killed by these government agencies. The 11 that did escape were later arrested. So, what does that say? It seems like I just gave 3 good examples on why we need firearms. Quite the opposite. So, when we talk about a law-abiding citizen owning a firearm, owning an assault weapon.
1 minute remaining.
Oh, God. What are we talking about? it's well known that these people who own these kinds of weapons, some of my closest friends included, it's in the case, and the reason why we have the Second Amendment is the case of a tyrannical government. Now, and yeah, they also are fun to shoot, but the reason that the Second Amendment was put in place was because the Founding Fathers wanted the American people to be able to resist a tyrannical government, including the one that we could possibly have in the next year or so, depending on how the election goes. So, what are we to do? Unfortunately, nothing. Because the ATF, the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, this alphabet soup of government agencies, knows more about you than you do. They know your search history, they know everything in your house, they know when you purchased it, where you purchased it from, including your guns. Any gun that's serial numbered. If a gun isn't serial numbered, if you've ever purchased an armament for it, so a lot of these guns have rail systems. A lot of guns have rail systems, so you have certain attachments for it, magazines, sights, stocks, anything like that, the government knows about it. If an armed rebellion is a result of having assault weapons in the face of a tyrannical government, so many innocent lives are at stake that it is not morally acceptable to continue to have these weapons. And Mr. Natena said
Thank you
that...
for your conclusion.
Mr. Natena said that these that certain statistics of deaths were negligible, and I would like to conclude my argument by saying that in no case is the loss of life negligible. We should do everything we can to prevent more loss of life, and I believe that this motion, with the given definitions, would do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Arap. For those of you who may be wondering why Mr. Arap was allotted more time, you might ask yourself if it was respectful, the commentary and the hissing which we heard from the upper right of the mezzanine. I do in fact take that into account. If you are going to deprive him of his speaking time, I will give it back. That being said, thank you for your participation. This is going well. Before we move on to our final presenter for the evening, we're going to take one question for Mr. Arap. The Chair would like to recognize the gentleman in the blazer in the back, Mr. Fedorov.
Yeah, it's not a blazer, it's a waistcoat. But thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question for you, Mr. Arabs. Definition of an assault weapon varies state to state. For example, California defines a shotgun with a revolving cylinder
Please ask a question.
as an assault weapon. Therefore, to enact your ban, would you want a federally issued definition of an assault weapon to make your ban easier?
Very good question, and of course, because we're talking about the U.S., this is, of course, a question of states' rights. I would say I've got to be honest with you, I didn't take that into consideration. I was expecting very different questions. But in the case of which states have jurisdiction over that, we didn't talk about shotguns because we specifically wanted to say that shotguns would not be part of this ban whatsoever, regardless of their function or ability. This includes semi-automatic and automatic. I think the ban that I mentioned would be a federal law, and then the states can make further bans if they so choose.
Fedorov, thank you for your question. The Chair would like to recognize Mr. McKenna as our final presenter of the evening. Mr. McKenna, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, a great man, hundreds of pounds more than I, certainly a much greater brain than I, and most certainly a much greater desire for cigars than I, once wrote many short stories, short mysteries of a little priest named Father Brown. I'm speaking of the great man G.K. Chesterton, who despite his weight had an even greater intellect. And this man wrote these stories about Father Brown, and one of them, at The Hammer of God, really deals with directly the problem we have been faced today. The philosophical, theological, and political implications of a ban on assault weapons in the United States. In this story, a very, very conniving, bad priest throws a hammer into the air, and it falls and crashes the head of, I believe it was his brother-in-law, killing him. Now the question that has to be asked, was the issue the hammer or the hand that threw it? Ladies and gentlemen, I want 3 points. We have to look today at the philosophical, theological, and finally political implications of a ban on assault weapons in the United States. Number 1, the philosophical. Ladies and gentlemen, is it the hand that threw the hammer or the hammer that is at fault? The hand. It is absolutely the hand, despite the hissing in the top right corner above me. It is the man that acts. This is something that we have learned day in and day out in our core of philosophy of the human person. It is the man that acts and the subject, not the object, that we need to be concerned about. Ladies and gentlemen, guns are to shootings as Tylenol is to accidental deaths. As Tylenol is to accidental deaths, and as a knife is to the chicken being cut. What do I mean by that? These things can be used in different ways, and we have the decision of how to use them. Is Tylenol a bad drug just because someone takes too many and overdoses upon it? Is a gun a bad instrument even if it is used for the right purposes? Denying the fact that sometimes it is used for the wrong purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, the question again comes down, is it the hammer or the hand that threw it that is at fault? And should we really be banning the hammer when it is the hand that we need to be working with? My second point is theological. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, 2243, makes very clear, lethal force is sometimes necessary in self-defense situations and should be minimized at all possible, but when necessary, can be used. Ladies and gentlemen, semi-automatic weapons, assault rifles, whatever term we want to use, are an acceptable way based on this premise that the Church presents, because it is very ambiguous about what self-defense can be, are very likely reliable means of self-defense. So we cannot say that this is a theological issue that the Church defends assault bans. We cannot say that the Church will take away our weapons. In fact, it is the opposite. The Church will support institutions that promote the protection of the individual. And another part of that protection of the individual comes to a natural deterrent. Ladies and gentlemen, I just heard a little bit earlier from actually our illustrious president of the student body, President Markle, that there was a reason why the Japanese... Okay, you're going to diss the president, I'm going to get mad. That came hundreds of years later, that took guns away from its people and subsequently killed millions. It was afraid of China, that took guns away from its people and had the Tiananmen Square massacre. Ladies and gentlemen, guns are one of the greatest ways that we as Americans can protect ourselves against a tyrannical government that may come in the future. And so, for the simple reasons of philosophy, theology, and American politics, I ask that you would stand by the American system and vote with the opposition on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. The chair would like to recognize one final question from the floor for our opposing the motion speaker, Mr. McKenna. Gentleman in the back in the blue shirt, your last name, please?
Diaz.
Mr. Diaz.
Mr. McKenna, I have a question. So are assault rifles ever used for hunting?
Please note, you get no follow-up question. I will give you one chance to amend your question before we finish.
So I'm guessing this the answer is yes. All right, follow-up question. Can you emphasize the importance of owning an assault weapon other than what are the What uses can you use an assault weapon for besides killing human life?
Thank you for your correction. I would like to use you as a model for everyone else who would like to ask a question in the night. Mr. McKenna, you have 1 minute to answer.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Mr. Diaz. An assault rifle can be used for something other than taking a human life. In fact, I think there were very good examples given by the affirming side that an assault weapon can be used for target practice. Many people take joy in using firearms for the sake of just the firearms themselves. But there is also the fact that assault rifles can be used in hunting, some assault rifles. You don't take a machine gun to a hunting expedition, but there are people that would use AR-15s or AR-19s for hunting. But I would say the primary reason for those weapons is in fact self-defense, and on top of that, potential tyrannical intervention from the government.
The chair would like to thank all of our presenters and everyone who asked a question, and now we are going to open the floor up for the main portion of our debate tonight. At this point, if you would like to give a speech, you are welcome to stand up, raise your hand, and wait to be recognized by myself. Please note that as this is a parliamentary-style debate, we encourage you to speak off the cuff and on the fly. Just to say, there are no notes. You may not come prepared, you may not reference things, you may not have quotes prepared. If you have anything that you would like to write down, it must stay at your seat when you get up to speak. During this portion of the debate, you will have 5 minutes to speak, and you will have the option to take one question from the floor, but you do not have to take a question. That being said, we'd like to recognize our first speaker from the floor. The chair would like to recognize the gentleman in the... Mr. Fedorov, could... Whatever Mr. Fedorov...
Waistcoat.
The gentleman in the waistcoat, you have 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Alright, so I'm going to kind of go through a few points here. Number one point is I'm a bit of a student of history. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the Battle of Lexington and Concord. Little do people know that it was actually caused... That was a misspeak. The reason why the British went to Concord was actually to seize rifles from people who were living in Concord at the time. They were doing a mandatory buyback and seizure of weapons of war, precisely because they were trying to enforce a military government in the state of Massachusetts. Right? So let me just put it this way. When we talk about being banned in the U.S., that's your direct context from the Second Amendment that Mr. McKenna just brought up, is that we believe that the ownership of guns among the citizenry generally and individually is something that deserves to be protected, and that's why we made it legal. To make it illegal is basically to say that the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and one of the fundamental points that we brought up as we fought the American Revolution, is completely illegitimate and therefore illegal. Okay? And we can't do that. That's not true. The second thing I want to point out, right? You know, we had Mr. Harris stand up here and underline assault weapons, and then tell us, I believe his definition is 45 caliber or higher, semi-automatic and automatic. Is that correct?
Excluding 45.
Excluding 45 caliber or above. That doesn't get rid of an AK-47. That's actually a smaller caliber. Or an M16, or an AR-15. Yes. Well, you said they fired...
Point of order, there is no dialogue allowed during the speech. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Wait, did that count? In any case, no matter how we define assault weapons, it all usually boils down to what Ms. Bova said, which is things that kill people, things that are out there at war. No offense, right? If my hunting rifle can punch a hole the size of a grapefruit in the deer, I think it can do the same thing to a human being. And that's the problem. Ultimately, the category assault weapons boils down to whatever you want to say it is. Any weapon can kill. Right? So what are we saying exactly here? That we're going to ban all guns eventually, just because we decide that hurting people is bad with any gun at any time? That's the logical conclusion, because you can't hold it at definition here. And number three, and this is, you know, kind of... Oh darn, I forgot point number 3. Give me a second. Right, militia. The third thing, right, when we talk about the Second Amendment, people often refer to the well-regulated militia. This is something I heard a lot in Canada, which doesn't have the ability to own a gun outside of hunting completely. And they said, well, a militia is something like the military, right? No. This was the thing. The Continental Army of the United States, the National Guard, the draft, all of these are signs that a militia for protecting this country is defined by any citizen who can handle themselves with a gun. Now, no one's saying, right, that this should be applied indiscriminately. There are certain people who are not fit to own a gun, period, end of discussion. People like felons, people who have serious medical issues that don't dispose of that. But this is the problem with an assault weapons ban, is it doesn't target people who have mental illnesses or people who are felons. It targets everybody indiscriminately. It targets absolutely everyone, regardless of whether they're law-abiding or not. And that's not fair to any single person who, barring the fact that they're completely sane, right, are being told that you can't have this particular freedom just because of what? What they would not do with it already, because they're law.
1 minute remaining.
I'm actually done, so thank you.
Would you like to take a question from the floor?
I don't mind.
You may take one person from the floor to whom you want to answer the question.
Ms. Bobo.
Thank you. Yes, it would indiscriminately take away guns from everyone. I say that the ban would be worth it to take away guns from people who would have it. Because,
Ms. Boba, is this a question?
my question is, why don't you believe one human life is worth it to saving one human life? Why is that not worth it?
I do believe one human life is worth it. I also believe that if I have the choice between accepting the fact that people in isolated cases, and generally not as part of any system with each other, are going to commit mass shootings because they're mentally ill, because they have issues, versus the potential, which is something you didn't really talk about, the tyrannical government, the systematic oppression of people, the systematic killing of people in the thousands, if not millions. Yes, Mr. Harris brought it up. Exactly, are you valuing one life as more important than the thousands that cannot be, you can't provide the end because all the guns have been taken away? At least in part of the trades, right? There was that one guy who intervened in the shooting and actually got the shooter with his gun, so I'm just saying.
Thank you for your speech. Please hand your microphone to Ms. Bates. For our next speech, the chair would like to recognize Mr. Alex Denley.
Thank you very much. So, what is absent in this discussion is the affirming side has already won on 2 different occasions, which is M16s, AK-47s, fully automatic, all these type of things. They are banned, by the way. They are machines of war, right? M16s, E11s. For people who don't know, these rifles that are meant for war, to kill people, lay down fire. Okay, that's already banned. You can't own those. Unless they were made before 1980, we've already enacted that. Likewise, in 94, we outright banned the variations of these war machines, these assault weapons, that were semi-automatic. The only difference is the companies that produce guns, they would make fully automatic weapons, right, for the government, and they would take off the automatic switch and sell them to civilians. That's what we're discussing, assault weapons. They're inherently used for war, right? I'd like a show of hands on this. How many are at war right now, individually? Spears. Get more rosaries. Those are the best assault weapons you can get, right? Okay, I'll give them a real. Okay, great. Rosaries, assault weapons, right, we use the war machines. Okay, to reel it back in, a little more serious. But 2 years ago, we had the tragic shooting in Las Vegas. I'm sure many people saw. This man got a hotel room in Monterey Bay, this huge hotel in Vegas, driven past him a lot of times, and it's right next to this huge field where they'll hold concerts. This man, over the course of 2 days, brought in 15 different rifles, pretty much all of them legal, except for his magazines, which were larger than 30, right? Because in Nevada, they have very wide open assault weapons laws. You can shoot automatics there, everything else. The states have been deciding these things. And here's this country music concert. And all of a sudden, just pop, 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 pop. And people are just falling. They're just trying to enjoy a concert with their friends. And, you know, we have video. You can watch the video of people videotaping it and hearing that, and they're saying, is this fireworks? What is this? There's a man literally in a hotel with these weapons of war that we've said, oh, we'll change it from automatic to semi-automatic, picking people off. Okay. That's what we want. We want that ability to be in the hands of everyone. Oh great, freedom, tyranny. Look, hunting rifles, handguns, shotguns, that's not assault weapons. Literally the companies, along with the NRA, they said, hey, let's just slap on this semi-automatic label and we'll sell to the populace because it's not fully automatic. That's the only reason we haven't banned them. Other countries are like, yeah, of course it should be banned. It's just pretty obvious at that point. Now, the point with like tyranny, these other things, yeah, good luck. You know, yeah, you got your AR-15 and these stuff. Good luck. I mean, the way that the government works now, we're beyond the point of no return, right? We decided, hey, we're not going to have fully automatic. Like, if you're going to have a well-formed militia with no automatic weapons, no tanks, no big cars, right? You know, like Humvees and stuff, and you're going to take on the United States military against tyranny. I mean, we don't have a defense against tyranny. This is just a fact of it now. So if you try and say, let's store up guns in my house and that'll protect us against tyrannical governments, good for you, Cowboy Bill, you know? Like, that's not going to work. It doesn't work. And for self-defense, I mean, anyone who has been around guns knows you don't want the first thing you grab at night if someone's invading your house to be an AR-15. Why? Hell yeah! Why? Why would you want that? Because those bullets are, you know, let's say full metal jacket bullets, those things go right through the wall. You might end up shooting your kids if you're trying to shoot somebody. Why would you want that? A shotgun serves much better purposes. And that's not included in assault weapons. Assault weapons is, once again, weapons of war. And so in both of these points, self-defense tyranny, we need to specifically address, do we want people to have these weapons out in the world, or is all the means of defense against tyranny, self-defense, accomplished by other things than these weapons of war? Thank you. I know the questions. I get to decide my questions.
Mr. Denley may select one person for a question.
I would love Mr. Natina.
Mr. Denley, are you aware that in a country thousands and thousands of miles of here, there is a militia of men in turbans firing World War II era antiquated rifles who are in a militia, and they have forced us into a 18-year war stalemate that we are frankly losing. And are you aware that that is a defense in their mind against tyranny?
That's war, and we've already killed Osama bin Laden. We're winning the war. It's war. Weapons of war should not be in the hands of civilians.
Are you aware that they are using weapons?
Given the quickness of Mr. Denley's response, we'll be taking one more question for Mr. Denley.
I didn't shoot one more time. So I want to ask Mr. McKenna as well. I'll go with Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Denley. What is it about assault weapons in particular that you would make us lose our freedom to have those as opposed to lesser caliber weapons such as regular rifles, regular handguns? What is it specifically about assault weapons that makes it that we need to get rid of them.
You can't shoot from the top of a hotel 100 people with a handgun.
In an unprecedented move from Mr. Denley, he answers 2 questions in the time most people can't answer 1. All right, the chair would like to recognize another speaker from the floor. The woman in the back. Could I have your last name, please?
Spotzerwinski.
Ms. Spotzerwinski, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Hi guys, so we've had a lot going on here tonight. We have had people saying that people with mental illness should not own guns. We have had people claim that someone is going to have the forethought of having an AR-15 for self-defense, but put an ammo into that gun that could easily shoot through a wall and kill the child. But instead, get a shotgun that possibly, that situation in which buckshot could possibly strike something else, not just the intruder. Like, this is what's going on right now, and I actually live in Chicago, and if any of you know anything about gun control, I should live in the poster city for gun control. I should live in the safest city in the world, but I don't. Do you know how hard it was for my family to be able to get one gun? One gun. And this is a gun that would 100% go, like, would fit not in the assault, it would be 100% allowed with an assault weapons ban. We had to get a FOID card, firearm operator owner identification card. We had to be licensed, we had to have a waiting period. And guess what? I still live in the city with the highest rate of gun crime, not only in the country, but in the world. Right? I've heard a lot of people talking about automatic weapons. I'm glad that somebody addressed that, because automatic weapons are banned for the general populace. And I'd like to talk about the UK. The UK has completely banned guns. And now they're trying to ban knives. There are fast food chains in which they will not pass out plastic knives for your meal. Okay? I mean, at this point, we have gone so far past banning weapons, and honestly, I'd really like to address not disallowing people that have mental illness to have guns, because this is also something that is currently going on with the red flag laws. If you have a mental illness, if you have been diagnosed with a mental illness, I'd like to know how they would like to uphold that. Because if you're just diagnosed, if you're on any sort of antidepressant, if you've had any types of PTSD, I've heard tonight it said that we should take away guns from veterans who have PTSD. Really? We should take away guns from the people that know best how to use them, from people who are versed best how to take care of them. And let's be honest, that specific population has the lowest incidence of gun crime on another human being, not necessarily on themselves, but on another human being. And again, let's talk about the fact that I live in the city with the highest amount of gun control. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place tonight. All of those people that are getting those guns to do those crimes, I guarantee you they didn't walk down to Dick's Sporting Goods like me and my family did and buy a gun. Where did they get it? They didn't go through the 3-day waiting period. They didn't apply for their FOID card. They didn't go to get their license. They didn't go to the 6-hour concealed carry class that my mom did. Guess what they did? They went in and they stole the gun. And guess what? Thank you. Thank you. They went in and they stole it. They didn't go through that. They're not. Do you really think that they're going to say?
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Do you really think that they're going to go, oh, guys, this is banned now? I'm finished, and I'll take a question.
You may select
select one person from the audience with whom you can take a question.
I don't know your last name, sorry.
The chair recognizes Mr. Araps for a question.
It's Araps, only Araps.
So you talked about the what we decided to call the black market fallacy. So you're saying that if a black market or an outside market exists for something, then there's no reason for it to be banned. Do you understand the implications of that outside this debate? Do you accept that? If you'd like me to clarify, I can.
There are no follow-up questions, but I kind of think I understand where you're going.
The chair will decide if there are follow-up questions. Do you understand this?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, you ruled against it.
I understand where you're, I think I understand where you're going. I don't know if I'm willing to. Yes, I do understand. Like, okay, let's put this in terms of something not like guns. I am on medication that is considered a controlled substance. I'm on Ritalin. And because the amount of people that are able to take that medication and deal it, or the amount of people that have stolen that from other people and dealt it, I now have to go to a psychiatrist once a month and pay to get another prescription, and that costs me outrageous amounts of money.
Please conclude.
Because that is a banned substance. Because other people have gotten to the point where they've dealt, and they have ruined it for other people. Do I think that should be a controlled substance?
Thank you for your
Yes.
conclusion.
No, I don't think it should be. Sorry. No.
We will recognize 2 more speakers from the floor for the 5-minute portion before we move into the lightning speeches. The chair would like to recognize the gentleman in the back. Someone could help him make his way to the floor, that'd be wonderful. You have 5 minutes.
We'll take that one. But, Mr. Johnson, I can say that. So, it's a natural right under the Constitution, Declaration for life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, but pursuit of happiness technically folds under liberty, because liberty, defined by the church and natural law, is to pursue the good. Good and happiness up there. And so property is your third natural right. But Aquinas contends that the fourth natural right, the right to revolution, is triggered if one of the 3 or any of the 3 are invalidated, broken, whatever. If the government breaks those 3 natural rights, the natural law rights, then Aquinas says something along the lines of, it is just and should be praised and rewarded for man to kill a tyrant. So just the idea that, well, the government's too big, it's too much, we're past the point of no return, to have the right to revolution that we should give up, it's a natural right, which means it supersedes all government, it supersedes all man-made laws, it's a natural law, and that means it's a God law, which means we do not have the right to supersede that. And if I have a tank in my garage right here, technically, yeah, it's natural law, and we don't have the right to supersede that. It doesn't matter the society in which we live today, people in the past live in the past, but the natural law never changes. So that's all.
Would you like to take a question? You may select one person to take a question.
Girl in the back. Yes.
Really simple question. Very easy question. I'm lost by your entire argument by like word 3.
Which side are you on?
I would decide that I should be able to own a tank in my garage, technically.
Thank you for both our speaker and for the question asked. Are there any others who would like to give a speech tonight during the long portion? Sir, I'd like to recognize the gentleman in the red shirt. Your name, please? Mr. John Mullen. You have 5 minutes.
So I'd like to start this speech by bringing everything back to something that was brought up in one of the first questions asked. Why or would one human life be worth it? And I say absolutely. We should do whatever it takes to save one human life. And that is the exact reason why I think that we should keep assault weapons. So the reasoning for this is simple. Say that we get into a war with Russia, and or not even with Russia. Let's just say with Mexico, because there's so much going on with them, right? And that all our relations, or at least there was. Maybe not now, but regardless, say we go to war with Mexico, and Mexico decides we're going to invade the United States. Say that happens. What's going to stop them? Obviously, we don't have the huge border wall yet. We don't have enough troops or supplies to guard the entire border. So as a result, the only way to stop them from invading the United States is the citizens. We need our citizens to be able to defend the United States in case any attack happens. Whether it's from Mexico, whether it's from someone else, we need this ability. In addition, there are some problems with the arguments brought up by the affirmative team. They said that they brought up many examples of times that weapons have been used for bad. And I agree, weapons can be used for bad. But none of those examples ever said specifically that it was an assault weapon that was used for bad. They only said that it was a normal weapon that was used for bad. They just said they had guns. They didn't say they had assault guns. None of the examples, especially in the first speech never addressed assault weapons. It simply addressed weapons. And our debate, if you look at the resolution we're looking at, it's the House believes that assault weapons should be banned, not just normal weapons, not just any gun. In addition, as others have brought up, this could create a snowball effect. It's fair, once political momentum starts, a lot of times it can be hard to change it. So if we start by making a law to say we're going to ban assault weapons, let's just stop them from taking the next step. Okay, so maybe we ban .45 or .45 weapons. Why don't we ban? We see it all the time in the courts. Things look at past precedents to determine whether or not we should do something. So in this case, the past precedents we will be setting is banning weapons. If all else fails, ban the weapon. And if we set this precedence, this will bring us to the same point, to the same place that Britain has right now, that England has. That we start with banning guns, maybe then we move to banning knives. Okay, how about this? Whenever elderly people are trip and fall, they can hit their head on the floor, and that can sometimes kill them. Does that mean that we should ban the floor? Just because this can kill someone does not mean we should ban this. The difference comes as was brought up by Mr. McKenna, in the hand that holds the weapon. It's not the gun's weapon that is being misused, it's the person's fault. So maybe we should have stricter bans.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Maybe we should have stricter bans on what kind of people should be able to use weapons. I'm not saying we shouldn't have that. What I'm saying is that's not what we're talking about in this debate round. This debate round is about banning assault weapons. And as a result, I think that banning assault weapons will not help. Especially because if a shooter was to go and say they can't buy an assault weapon and they want to do a shooting anyway, they'll just say, okay, what's the next best thing? Okay, I'll pick up the next gun, and they'll use that. Nothing we can do, no amount of banning weapons will stop shootings. Unfortunately, that is a problem that we have in our modern society. But for all these reasons, I strongly urge a negative ballot at the end of this round. Thank you very much.
We may take one question.
Okay, so I'm a little bit lost on your point here. You're saying no amount of banning will stop it, and also where will the banning end? My question is, what is your preferred amount of banning of guns? Thank you.
So I was born in Texas, So as of right now, I'm not saying that I say we should have no guns. I'm also not saying that we should have every kind of gun allowed, okay? I believe that there should be limits to the amount of guns, but the only kind of gun that, like, say you have a huge missile launching bazooka. Obviously, normal people should not need that kind of weapon. But I believe that even banning assault weapons in this case will not make a difference because people can just get a different kind of weapon that's maybe just slightly under the ban.
Thank you for your speech. There will be no more questions. At this point, we would like to move into the lightning round, in which you will have 2 minutes to speak, and there will be no follow-up questions. Now, there's been a lot of very impressive and heartfelt rhetoric surrounding guns tonight, and I'm thankful for it. I'm also not particularly impressed by it. We will be recognizing for the first 2 speeches only those who are affirming the motion, pro-gun control speeches. Mr. McKenna.
I would like to cede my time to Mr. O'Brien.
The chair, well, miffed, will allow it.
I got 2 minutes, I'm going to make this quick. Let's get to the root of the issue with gun control, but more specifically gun violence. There's a lot of violence happening in the U.S. And when it comes to guns, 60% of that violence, well, not 60%, there's 60,000 deaths in the U.S. just from gun violence alone. 50% of that is from people committing suicide. Another 20% of that comes from mass shootings. So the root of the problem here is mental illness, and it's been thrown around a lot. However, nobody's actually dove into it at all. It's kind of been thrown around a little bit, and here's my proposition for you. Every single person that wants a gun should go through screenings with a doctor. You're going to assess your mental status and to see where you're at. Because quite frankly, I'm not comfortable with you having an assault rifle if you haven't been screened by the doctor. If you haven't been screened by a doctor, and you want to know why? Because 25% of people, over 25% of people, struggle with mental illnesses, which means 25% of people in this room struggle with mental illnesses. So let's get real here, guys. 25% of people who struggle with mental illnesses, and anybody can buy a gun over the age of 18. Okay, so, well done. Anyway,
remaining.
Thank you. So, I want to tell you a quick story. One of my best friends struggles with depression and anxiety, and PTSD, and they went in and were able to buy a gun. How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? Somebody with a mental illness has a gun. Okay? With 50% of the shootings in the US being suicide, we need to get the guns out of the hands of people who have mental illnesses. And the way you do that is by going through screenings every 5 years. Because I don't want somebody who has mental illness with a gun. Because I want to feel safe walking around my college campus.
Please conclude.
I want to feel safe going to the movies. I want to feel safe dropping off my kids to school. Future kids.
Thank you for your speech.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the gun show, baby. Ah, boom, bang, fire power. The chair would like to kindly remind the audience that there are no interruptions unrecognized by the chair. The chair would like to recognize Mr. Tearsharp. You have 2 minutes.
Howdy, y'all. I too hail from the great state of Texas, and I'm here to define a couple terms for all of you. Frankly, I have not, with the exception of a few people, I haven't really agreed with anyone affirming the motion, but I still think they're right. First off, first term, it's pronounced Waco, not wacko. Second term is assault weapon. This is the big question. For me, I love guns. I love shooting. I think they're great. I mean, there's a lot of really good purposes for them. You got to make sure that those who shouldn't have them don't have them. But by and large, they're a good thing. I think we agree on that. And I think that if you agree with that, you ought to agree with my definition of what an assault weapon is. So, very first time the term was used was in World War I. The Germans, their long guns, shot too far, didn't work. Their short guns, they shot fast, but they didn't get far enough. So what did they invent? A lightweight machine gun. They called it the something. It means assault rifles. And it was fully automatic. Into Vietnam, we had the M16 that was fully automatic. As a lot of people said when we brought it back, got the AR, it doesn't stand for assault rifle, it stands for Armalite, by the way. They took it off of fully automatics, so it was a single, it was a semi-automatic. And then, so right now, pretty much what's happening in politics is a lot of the government, they're confusing up the terms. They're saying it's an assault rifle. It functions the same way as a pistol. I think she said teeny tiny retro pistols, we should bring those back. That killed 34 people in the Virginia Tech shooting. They're just as dangerous. And if we want to go ahead and make a strong law, if we're going to say that these, and gun producers, they're getting around it. They're finding all these ways to get around it. So we have to make sure that we're banning common sense stuff, such as bump stocks, which take a semi-automatic weapon and make it fully automatic machine gun. We have to make sure that we're banning reasonable measures. So what I'm saying is, an assault weapon is a giant machine gun. It is radically different from a semi-automatic weapon, or else you're just lumping in pretty much all the guns together. And for that reason, we should agree that they should be banned. They're just not what y'all are thinking.
Thank you for your speech. Gentlemen, I recognize any speaker, regardless of your particular encouragement of the motion. We'd like to recognize the gentleman here in the front. Your last name, please. Brilliant. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm not very good at speaking, so just... So, I heard what is probably what I think the weakest argument in support of the gun ban, and that is that militia would never be able to compete with the military. So I first of all think that there's one fallacy. They say assault rifles are only used as weapons of war, and then they say we would never be able to keep up with the war. So I don't know, that's sort of confusing to me. But the other point is that how many people do you think in the military would go around taking everyone's guns? Have you ever met people, like half of my family is in the military. I know dozens of people. I've never met one person who is not pro-gun. So how many, I don't know any percentages, but it's probably a lot greater than
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Than the average citizen. So I think that would never work trying to take guns. So somebody asked it, how would you go about taking guns? I think that if the police went door to door, I don't think anyone would surrender their guns. And I think you say it saves lives, but I think that if you really try to ban guns and you really send the military out, that would just start a civil war with everyone in there. There would be so much more bloodshed than in any of the few mass shootings that there are. So I don't think a gun ban will do anything except bad.
Thank you for your speech. The chair would like to recognize the gentleman in the back on the door. Your last name, please.
Puffer.
Mr. Puffer, you have 2 minutes.
So I would like to address the term weapon of war. It sounds great. It sounds intense, like a video game. A sword carried by the Roman legions was considered a weapon of war. The musket, which fired one shot and took 30 seconds to reload, was considered a dangerous weapon of war. That is not a good. It's like, how are we going to be able to, like, what the heck makes it say that? Like, assault weapon. Assaulting is an action. That's why when we say sexual assault, what is that? It is assaulting someone sexually. So you can't just throw on assault to a weapon and say, well, that makes it different from any other weapon. No. Weapon is a weapon. It doesn't matter what you use. And this idea that if we get rid of guns, it'll all be okay is ridiculous. There was a kid in Utah. He brought a bomb to school. Yet nobody reported it. Why? Because it's not a gun, so it doesn't count as school shooting.
1 minute remaining.
The Boston bombers, they used 2 bombs. 9/11, 2 airplanes. You cannot just say, we get rid of one weapon and everything will be fine. Humanity is creative and we will find another way.
Thank you for your speech. The chair would like to recognize the gentleman in the black. Your last name, please. Mr. Donald, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So we've heard, the last speaker just spoke to a point that we've heard a couple times throughout the round. I'd like to point out the obvious fallacy with this. We've heard a lot of people, I think there's a lot of people who just like to pat themselves on the back and say, well, we should keep our guns, okay? We're here to have an actual dialogue. So if you're going to take this sort of argument and kind of extrapolate it and say, well, we shouldn't ban guns because what are we going to do, ban knives like we do in the UK? Okay, well, we heard the obvious implications of the other side of this argument from one of our illustrious speakers earlier when he said, I should be allowed to have a tank. No, you should not. That's absurd. So, should I be allowed to have a nuclear missile silo in my backyard? No! Look, sorry. You're seeing the absurdity of this, right? Of course I'm not going to have that. And of course we're not going to ban all knives. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about this specific resolution. So let's stop just creating a firefight with that, okay? So to speak to what I actually want to talk about, I really came in really wanting to support the affirming side of this resolution because I thought it's just going to be a bunch of people standing up and just negating the resolution because that's all anybody wants here. But really, the affirmative team has provided really nothing for us to work with. I've heard some good arguments here, so let's talk about a couple of them. The person who, I believe, up in Las Vegas shot a bunch of people with a weapon, I think someone already mentioned that that weapon was illegal. And let's pretend that, the weapon he used, we're going to ban it now. He could still get it. The thing to understand is the old weapon ban that happened in 1994, those weapons are still around. And the reason is because when the weapon was banned, the only thing that was banned was the new weapons that were being produced. If you had a semi-automatic, you could still use it. If you had an assault weapon, you could still use it. Back when they banned the guns originally, you just weren't allowed to buy new ones, right? So if we were to actually ban the guns, I really don't like this, that's absurd, but let's be honest, if we were going to try and, ban them and take them all away, we are going to see a lot of people getting hurt. We are going to see a lot of people, probably like you, sir, getting shot and killed. I mean, if what we want is better human life and more safety, I don't think banning guns and trying to take them away from people is really a good option. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair would like to recognize a speech affirming the motion, given the 2 speeches we've had in the past. With the gentleman in the blue shirt and the black blazer. Please be reminded this is in fact a respectful and mature exchange of ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Gentleman. Thank you, sir. So, I'd first like to address the idea of, assault weapons is such a nebulous term, and we don't know what that means, and your car, if you use it to hit somebody with it intentionally, that could make it an assault weapon. I actually looked it up, and in the dictionary there is a definition for an assault weapon, which more points to to an assault rifle, which it defines as essentially being a naked gun designed to resemble a military rifle, but designed for semi-automatic firing. So therefore, this motion does have a definition for what an assault weapon is. It's a little loose in the U.S. Does that include like districts like Colombia, or are we talking about like territories like Puerto Rico too, or is it just okay? Never mind. So I saw sometimes. I would like to point out
1 minute remaining.
Ah, dang. I would like to point out the fact that the church does argue that the purpose of government is to ensure the common good of its citizens. And many people would argue, well, not many people, but some would argue that that common good would ensure banning certain types of assault weapons. This argument is not original to me. I want to point out, it was first made by one Dr. Kevin Miller, an assistant professor of theology at a little school you might have heard of called Franciscan University of Steubenville. And on one final note, I would like to point out, this past April marked the 20th anniversary of the Columbine High School massacre. And considering that several of the weapons used in that attack could be considered, by that dictionary definition, as assault rifles, and that was 20 years ago, things have not gotten better. And I personally would not...
Please conclude.
Thank you. I personally would not like to see the United States, this country is being heralded as the greatest nation on earth, as being some place that allows that kind of insanity to persist 20 years after one of the most horrific events in modern history.
Thank you for your conclusion. The floor would like to recognize Ms. Clara. Bauer? You have 2 minutes.
Okay, hopefully this won't take 2 minutes. Mostly I want to address the original reference to the Las Vegas shooting. It was a very interesting point that with the type of gun that the guy had, he was able to shoot as many people and catch them off guard, as opposed to having another type of gun. I remember when it happened, however, mentioning to people that the problem, okay, yes, the gun was the problem, but Las Vegas is a problem. So in my remaining 2 minutes, I'd like to just say a little bit about that. I was born in Reno. I'm from an hour into the desert from Reno. Which is, my dad figured out on the map, you can look it up on like driving directions. The distance between Reno and Las Vegas is further than the distance of Montreal and New York City. We have gambling, like slot machines in the gas station, in the grocery store. All of us that live there know, okay, if you're a little kid, don't walk in that area, because you have to be over 21 to be in that area. People, like this guy wasn't carrying the guns, to the best of my knowledge, just in his hand up to his room. People, they ignore sin. As a society, we're too good. So what about the ban? Like, we can ban it because we're too good for that now. Nobody's going to hurt each other. And that's kind of the point I want to make, is there's more to think about, especially at Franciscans. Are we just supporting, okay, the gun's the obvious choice, it really stands out, do we want to go for that? Or do we want to say, no, we should pay attention to each other, and maybe the gun is just a weapon, and it's not the person, has nothing to do with the person, like it is the person and the gun.
Thank you for your speech. Chair would like to recognize the young woman in the white. Your last name, please. Again, one more time, please. Ms. Downa, you have 2 minutes.
Earlier, I believe one of the defendant speakers mentioned the black market fallacy. If I understand correctly, that this refers to the position that if something has a black market, if people are going to find a legal way to get it, now then it should not be banned. And this is popularly condemned as being the defeatist way of thinking, and like obviously all
Hold the mic a little bit closer.
sorry. and it's characterized as saying, let's just make all drugs legal, that would make things fine. I think that the black market fallacy, while obviously wrong, does not really apply as much in this case because while, for example, making drugs illegal, we don't want anyone to be using these drugs recreationally. We do want certain people to have guns. The black market, if good people stop having guns, if law-abiding people stop having guns, then only the non-law-abiding people will have guns, and that is a terrible situation.
Thank you for your speech. Chair would like to recognize the gentleman in the back corner. Your last name, please. Mr. Colts, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am from the great state of Texas. Now, what I would like to address is that, yes, you can buy the parts to build guns. So, you might be able to ban guns, but unless you can ban building parts for guns, if you can ban, you would have to ban the raw materials, you would have to ban the machines that make the hardware, you would have to ban every single accessory. You would have to go to the point, including, if you were to ban guns, yes, we will probably go to where the UK is. But do you know where that will lead? That will lead not just only police officers having guns, but do you want to send our soldiers into battle with just their fists? No! We can't win wars unless we have better guns than the other guys. So, if you want to ban guns, then you are dooming our country. You want to live as captives of another country? I don't think so. I won't. Like I said, I'm from Texas. You may take away our food, you may take away our livelihood, but you will not take away our guns!
Thank you for your speech. Chair would like to welcome back Ms. Cirilla. Ms. Cirilla, you have 2 minutes.
Hey guys, really bad at this. I'm still in high school. Shout out to that guy. That guy, I love patriotism. Three things I want to cover. 1 minute, 3 seconds. How, then what, and I have a solution for you that I don't think many people have brought up yet. So I want to ask you how, because, okay, I'm from Steubenville, not Chicago, but the crime rate's pretty high. I think 1 or 2 years ago, on a street called Woodlawn, there was a drug bust, but also they found that these people in the ghetto here had been stockpiling many unregistered guns, and it's gonna be like, there's a lot of that all over, and you're gonna have a hard time finding all of that. So that's my, how are you gonna do that? But once you do, if it's gonna take a couple years, in, I think it was Germany or France, somewhere in Europe, a couple years ago, someone used a truck as an assault weapon. So what you're saying is they ban guns, and this guy said earlier, like in Canada and stuff, yeah, they're not using guns to hurt people, but they're using trucks, they're using knives and stuff. I'm really bad at this, I'm sorry. But then my solution is that just live a good Christian life, use your guns the right way, live up morally to the Christian standards, and that's how we're going to solve the problem.
Thank you for your concluding speech, and the chair would like to remind all those interested in speaking that this is an off-the-cuff and on-the-fly event, and that no self-deprecating remarks about otherwise fantastic speeches. The chair would like to recognize the gentleman in the flannel shirt. Your last name? Mauer. Mr. Mauer, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say that going far back in this debate, the idea that the NSA, the ATF, they already have this information on us, so we should just give up. To an American, that idea is poison, okay? When we fought the revolution, it
was against the most powerful military the world had ever seen. And we were a bunch of farmers. And we won. Now, I know it's different. I know it's different. But it's just, every American should know the age-old words of Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. That's what it's all about. Now, I'd like to shift the paradigm, shift the argument a little bit. So it's not about will they, won't they, will the government turn on us someday, which, I didn't think they used to, then Beto O'Rourke started running for president. And then, now, I'm of age, I live in Ohio.
1 minute remaining.
When I most likely buy a gun next summer, I'm not doing it with the idea, I'm going to kill my local ATF agent. That's not what I'm doing. It's more than that. It's about the philosophy of this country, about the philosophy of the person. It's about humans have dignity to own that firearm. The state hates it to think that an individual can take the idea of self-defense into their own hands. They hate that concept. And that's what being American is all about. It is about dignity, it's about responsibility, and to just throw that all away is nonsense.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. The chair would like to recognize the gentleman with the hat.
So a minute ago, a guy got up here and he started talking about the definition of an assault weapon, and I think that's what this kind of comes down to. And he said he found one in the dictionary. I actually looked on my way over here. I didn't find one, but he did. And he said it referred to rifles. Ladies and gentlemen, I have brought with me today the first assault weapon.
No assault weapons in the room, please.
That's it, guys. That's it. I mean, literally, anything you want to kill somebody with is an assault weapon. It's kind of stupid. And a minute ago, he said the American government should not allow things like Columbine to happen. Well, that's a dramatic, emotional statement right there. He's right. We shouldn't, and we don't. That's why it's illegal. Never at any point was it legal to go into a school and kill lots of kids. Nobody can do that. Nobody can do that. NRA never condoned that. That's not a thing, right?
1 minute remaining.
And I know this is a very overused argument, but it's very true. I mean, when you take away guns from the good guys, the bad guys, they got guns, right? I mean, you tell people don't use heroin, and the bad people, they still use heroin. It's kind of a foolish thing to think that you can take them away from everybody. It just doesn't work. That's it.
This isn't something that you can just dismiss and be like, oh, look, a rock. I can kill someone with a rock. Sure you can. You can't kill 10 people in a couple seconds. I'm wrong. I've had a point, but I would like to address the black market, the fallacy, saying that, oh, if you take away everything from the good guys, if you make it illegal, the bad guys are still going to do it. If you're saying that you should try and temper violence, that evil people will still be violent even if it's illegal, then why are we fighting so hard to try and make stricter abortion laws?
Thank you very much for your speech. We will be accepting 2 more speeches from the floor before we move into the concluding speakers from the presenters. We would like 1 speech affirming the motion and 1 speech opposing the motion. The first speech we will welcome is the affirming the motion speech from the crowd. We can have this young woman here, the only speaker who has not yet spoken. Your last name, please.
Bowman.
Miss Emily, you have 2 minutes.
Alright, so in case you haven't noticed, we're at, let's see, we're at Franciscan University. And if you've ever taken a class here, which I'm assuming most of you have, God is mentioned at least 3 times in every argument. But he hasn't really been mentioned in this one. And I've been here for quite a while now. So, it's crazy to me. Because, let's see. see, this house believes that assault weapons should be banned. Okay, fair statement, fair statement. A lot of the opposing arguments I've heard are, no, don't take our guns. We should kill them before they kill us. I personally am pro-life. Wow. I'm pro-life. I'm Franciscan. So probably at first. I'm pro-life, which means I am pro a lot of things. Pro, I don't know, people being alive, pretty much in the title.
1 minute remaining.
Now, I disagree with a lot of things, but assault weapons in general. When you say assault weapons, one particular type of gun pops into mind. If you say assault weapon, I'm not going to automatically assume car or rock or Tylenol. You know, like Tylenol that were made to help people instead of harm people, or animals they are used for hunting too, that I will acknowledge. But in general, I'm pro-life. I'm pro-children staying alive when they go to church. School. I'm pro-people being alive when they go to church. I'm pro going to Walmart without dying, you know, just because I need, you know, books or something. Like, I should be able to buy crackers without worrying about death. And I think that's my main point right there is I'm pro-life, and a lot of people at the school are too. And I haven't heard of mention of children, babies, or any argument that is kill the others without.
Thank you for your conclusion. Given the number of people we have, the chair is willing to recognize 2 more speeches, contrary to the previous statement. The first of those we'd like to bring to the floor, Mr. Dexter.
I'd like to start by saying something kind of unpatriotic. I'm taking natural law with Weicker right now. And he very clearly outlines that Lockean principles, which are single-handedly the most important aspect of the American founding, are not very Catholic. And as sad as it is to realize that, you have to come to terms with the fact that gun rights, in and of themselves, are the only things keeping us above water right now as a country. And that's primarily because we don't have the understanding that Locke had a natural right was basically a perversion of the natural law itself.
1 minute remaining.
So the only thing that he provides for is you having your own desires and other people having their desires, and social contract, which allows people to get together and keep that and keep their rights as they will. And if you don't have something like weapons in a place where you have property in the United States, there's really nothing you can do to keep something like a tyrannical government. And it's not really even a matter of if they're going to do that right now. But we're pretty screwed if we don't have our guns.
Thank you for your speech. The chair would like to recognize Ms. Uhlenkamp. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to be here before you tonight. There have been so many points that have been brought up, one side or another, philosophical, emotional, and something that I found interesting was a point that was touched on in the very beginning, which happened to be theological. We've addressed the fact that this is a slippery slide. Where is it going to end if we start by banning guns? It's a great question. But then, the follow-up question is, where do we start? The fact that owning a gun is not immoral is very clear to all of you. That was brought up in our first speech. But But I would like to point out that an abortion is immoral. Here at this university, we are pro-life. We are pro-life. But owning a gun has everything to do with being pro-life. Equating the two arguments is not valid. On one hand, you have owning a gun, which is a good thing. On the other hand, you have having an abortion, ending a life, which is an evil. Ladies and gentlemen, until we can put our abortion laws in their proper place, we do not have the right to talk about banning guns. Our guns are used, actually, for the purpose of defending our own lives. And if we don't value our own lives enough to protect them, then why are you here?
Thank you very much, Mr. Olcott, and thank you for all of those of you from the floor who gave speeches tonight. If you wanted to make a speech but were unable to do so, I apologize and do hope that we will see you again at another debate in the near future when you have a chance to speak. At this point in time, we move into the very final portion of the debate in which one presenter from each side, the affirming and the opposing, presents a 5-minute concluding speech. At the end of these concluding speeches, there will be no questions, there will be no comments. We'll move directly into the voting stage, in which you'll be able to vote either for the motion, against the motion, or abstaining from voting. So tally the votes, the motion will be decided, the debate will be concluded. Without any further ado, I encourage you all to stay and hear the affirming and opposing speeches. And I would like to welcome our presenter from the affirming side, Mr. Aras. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for everyone who spoke, everyone who would like to speak. It's very important that we contribute our ideas, our thoughts to any sort of intellectual discussion we have, regardless of how one-sided the argument may be. Let's not joke about that. I'd say most of the people in this room are for guns. You know, the gentleman back there saying he wants a tank. I'm sure a lot of people in this room would like tanks in their homes. Because, you know, tanks are cool, let's be real. But that's not why we're here. Yes, we have a vote, and the vote is important, and the vote is something to give us a gauge of how the campus is thinking about this issue, but that's not the purpose, that's not the sole purpose of our society. The sole purpose of our society is to encourage intellectual thought, encourage different ideas. And something that we need to think about is we can't just have a blanket statement on this. We can't just say, like, all guns are good, and that's that. So I want to bring it back to what I said in my opening arguments about the Alphabet Boys. My two friends up here with the Mulumave flag and no step on snake flag. Buddy, I hate to tell you, but they've already stepped on you, and you haven't done anything about it. I was going through Facebook the other day, and I saw this meme, we'll call it, that said something along the lines of, you know, the founding fathers, if they could see this country nowadays, they'd be appalled. We would have already rebelled by now. So why haven't you, boomer? How come no one has done anything when we had Roe v. Wade passed in 1973, over 40 years ago? A law that is important, that we all agree is important. How come no one's done anything in regards to high taxes? How come no one's done anything in regards to a radical push forward in the LGBTQ agenda? We've got child drag queen shows, and we haven't done anything about it. So what's the breaking point? At what point do you force them to come and take it? At what point do you say you're not going to step on me? At what point do all of you gun owners say we're going to go out there and, you know, we're going to get together, we're going to take down the government, we're going to take down all these libtards, and we're going to repeal all these bad laws, and it's going to be Catholic America, and everything's going to be hunky-dory. What point is that? Because for me, it's already happened. That's why I'm arguing in opposition to this, because We have reached the point of no return. You know, the old saying is, for Christ, where 2 or more are gathered in my name, I am there. For the ATF, the line is, where 50 or more are gathered against the government, I am there. If you have a gun, you're on a watch list. If you're in a group that considers itself an anti-government militia, you're on a very specific watch list that they're watching very carefully. If it's more than 50 people, the government has people in that organization. Just ask the Proud Boys. Ask the alt-right. Ask Richard Spencer. Ask Milo Yiannopoulos. Ask his friends, his group. Ask any of these actors who've had their careers dragged through the mud because they dared to oppose the government in a way that the government didn't like. We're past the point of no return. So, what do we have to consider? Life. Is it moral for us to continue with this gung-ho, America's the best, we're number one, our guns, and you're gonna give me liberty or give me death? You've chosen neither.
1 minute.
Thank you. I know it's a played out argument. If we ban all the guns and we save one life, then it's worth it. I know it's a played out argument. But I truly believe in my heart of hearts that you're past the point where owning guns for the purpose of possibly overthrowing a tyrannical government, which is what that means. Let's not kid ourselves. No one's hunting with that. No one's defending their home with that. It's much more effective to use a handgun if you're in close quarters, or a shotgun. Disagree with me all you want. Try using an AR-15 in a closet. We believe in life. We believe that we should protect life. We're past the point of no return. The best thing we can do is to do everything we can to protect life. That's what this motion is suggesting. That's what this motion is supporting. I love America. I love all of our freedoms. But we've let ourselves be trampled on. And now all we can do is cling to the little hope that we have left. And all we can do is protect life in the only ways that we can. Thank you very much.
Mr. Harris, thank you very much for your concluding remarks. Chair would now like to recognize the concluding speaker, our final speech of the night from the opposing side. Ms. Tina, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's regrettable that the dialogue tonight is kind of taking the direction it has, in which we're talking about a tyrannical government and overthrowing the government. And I think really, when it comes down to it, we're talking about banning specific weapons due to an influx in mass shootings. Can we all agree on that? Because, that was kind of unstated the entire time. And I kind of want to get back to what I started with, and that is that the empirical evidence, the data, suggests that that's not going to stop this problem, and it's going to suggest that it's... Yeah, okay, sorry. In any event, in that case, I wish, this place would let me conceal a carry, I could save y'all. All right, what was I saying about something? Okay, so the empirical evidence, the data, suggests that banning these kinds of weapons would lead to more additional violence than would be prevented in these very specific incidents. And when we really look at the problem, mass shootings are a sociological phenomenon. Okay? There have been many not conservative, not Republican intellectuals, public policy experts who have talked about this. In Kyoto, Japan, earlier this summer, 34 people were killed in an arson attack. It was after the Christchurch shooting in Australia. The Christchurch shooting got 5 times more media coverage in this country than 34 people who died in an arson attack. Why? Because guns are a convenient scapegoat for a sociological problem, particularly with a threshold action of copying. Ever since Columbine happened, which one of the guns might have been considered an assault weapon, but 2 were shotguns and 1 was a handgun. Let's set that straight about Columbine. We have seen copycat actions. Malcolm Gladwell is a very famous intellectual and sociologist, wrote in the New Yorker in 2015, left-leaning, that no amount of banning guns, assault weapons, whatever, handguns, is going to fix this problem of violence. Violence is innate to human beings, unfortunately. And now that there is a cultural script for committing mass attacks, it is going to continue. And if guns were banned, if any kind of assault weapon were banned, it would go on to the trucks like they use in different European attacks. It would be arson attacks. We have a cultural sickness. We have a sociological problem. We're living in a simulacrum, to tell you the truth. And banning a specific type of gun, I mean, just look at the compliance rates. I quoted those at the start. 4%, 5%. There's 16 million guns in this country. Who's going to put up the $4 trillion to $6 trillion for a buyback program? I mean, we need to look at this both idealistically but also pragmatically. And I know we're at Franciscan, so we don't really, do realistic things. We don't think about actual. And I'm not trying to throw God out of the mix, because we do respect life, and we show that respecting one's own life, protecting it effectively, and protecting it informed in the ones we love is what matters. Now, I don't know who owns guns here. I don't know who owns assault weapons, but it's also really regrettable that, so many statements are just blanket statements. I don't want to defend. I have an AR-15, I have an AK-74, and an AKM, modernized, AK-47, more or less. I don't know why we're talking about, well, this is more effective for the. Who made you an expert? I mean, seriously, raise your hand if you own a gun.
1 minute remaining.
Raise your hand if you own a assault-style weapon. What you're comfortable in defending your life with is based on your training. It's based on what kind of situation you have, where you live. It's, you can't just say, well, this is what, like Joe Biden's famous statement, I'm gonna just grab a shotgun, just fire out into nowhere. But what it comes down to is it's getting back to the empirical data. It's looking at this, it's looking at it and saying, you know what, if we enacted this law, something bad is gonna happen. And that's just the case. Compliance is not gonna happen, there's no money for it, and unfortunately, a lot of gun rights people are pretty crappy people, to tell you the truth. And they are going to react the wrong way. What are they holding on to? They're holding on to their gun rights. This is the threshold for them. If we want to prevent more violence, we don't go step on the snake. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate the way gun owners think, a lot of them in this country, because they don't have that informed mindset with the philosophy, with the anthropology behind them. But we can make an effort to start doing that if we talk about this issue in an informed way and we don't react to emotion and start to enact laws that are only going to lead to more violence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nagina, for your conclusion. I'd like to thank both the opposing side and the affirming side for their speeches here tonight, and for everyone who came out to the debate. In just a moment, we're going to hear from Alex Denley, the president of Veritas Society, who puts on these debates, and I hope that when you hear from him, you can see that the mission statement and the vision of Veritas Society is lived out in debates like these. The kind of charitable debate, the intellectual culture that you have seen witnessed here is in fact what he's going to speak with you about. It's real. And with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Denley, our very venerable president of
Thank you all for coming. It's been a very enjoyable event. I hope you've enjoyed. I just wanted to speak briefly about Veritas, as we have our wonderful poster. We exist to promote Christ-centered intellectual endeavor at campus. The debates like tonight are some of our main events. We are the premier, this is the premier place for discussing and debating on campus. And it's been really enjoyable seeing it grow. We also put on apologetic seminars. Whereas these dialogues, debates, reasonable Catholics can disagree, our apologetic seminars are meant to develop Catholics to make a reply to the modern world. Those are going to be on, it's an 8 weeks, it's an 8-week program. We've already started, we're on our 3rd week. You can come for one, you can come for all. They're in the Fireside Lounge at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. The next one will be Understanding an Eternal Hell. How do I understand that? And there we hope it'll be a good time. So we're really excited about that. So we all encourage you to come out. On your way out as well, you'll be receiving, if you'd like, fresh off the print on Sunday evening instead of Monday morning, the new edition of The Gauntlet, which maybe you've probably seen. It's wonderfully written. I just want to read a little bit of the satire part that our very own Miss Bova wrote. So it says, in an effort to combat scrupulosity and reduce confession wait times, the Franciscan TORs offered a list of commonly confessed actions. As one friar wrote, have literally no effect on your soul. Please stop confessing these things to us. It's already so late, there's 47 people in line behind you. The nearly 7-page document is split up to address various campus groups. Household members were excused from not liking their gear and for spamming the group chat with memes. Philosophy majors are reminded that they can still major in philosophy without a beard and tan satchel. Most of the actions listed apply to the whole student body, from forgetting bagels in the half toaster, to not holding your umbrella out as somebody's walking beside you. The list of nonsense was designed to act as a filter for the post-examined conscience. Take this with you and just do us both a favor, remove all the unnecessary stuff. So it's So pick up a copy on your way out. Highly encourage you to come to the apologetic seminars. People say, how can I stay up to date with Veritas? How can I know what's going on? The best way to find us is on our Facebook page, Veritas Society, FUS. We post all of our events on there. As well as our Instagram page, post a lot of stuff on there. And in fact, this topic, assault weapons ban, was part of a poll we did on Facebook to see if there's interest in this type of debate. So our next debate will be in 3 weeks from today, October 20th, and it's going to be on some type of Catholic practice. This has been our political debate. We have some controversial topics, which is why the discussion continues on Facebook, right? In this regard. So, one of the topics perhaps for our next debate would be, this House believes that faithful Catholics should receive communion on the tongue. Right, so these are controversial, okay. I understand, but this is the area to debate these things. We, if you were at our debate last semester on this House believes that praise and worship music should have a place in the liturgy. Yes, we debated that, and it went super well. In fact, you can find the whole debate on our YouTube page. It's all there. So anyways, following us on Facebook, keeping up with us, best way to keep up with us. And yeah, to get involved. Like, we saw that there's a lot of encouragement with this assault weapons ban topic. We went ahead with it, so. Yeah, thank you all for coming, and we're going to move straight into the vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Denley. I was sold again on the mission of Veritas. The way voting works at the end here, I'm going to ask for all those who would like to affirm the motion to stand and raise your hand and make yourself as visible as possible. There should be no confusion. I don't want people standing up and sitting back down. It's very difficult for me to count all of you guys when we have that happen. So we'll go through this quickly. Those who are affirming will stand, then they'll sit. Those who are opposing will stand, then sit. Those who are abstaining should neither stand nor sit at any point. I'm sorry, neither stand. You will always be sitting. That being said, will all those who would like to affirm the motion tonight that this House believes that assault weapons should be banned in the U.S., if this is the view that you hold, please stand. Note for Mr. Denley. Oh, you're just affirming. This is going to be close. I got to recount. All right, please sit. And because if I've guessed anything about the intellectual temperament of those who have argued against the motion tonight, I'm sure you don't want to remain seated. Please stand if you would like to. And with that, the motion Please stay standing if you'd like to oppose the motion. We're going to try and get a full count. All right. With the total number of 12 votes for the affirming side of the motion, and with 116 this House believes that assault weapons should be banned in the United States has failed.